So, Kate, we're looking forward to hearing about the topic of social value and how to make it work for commercial organisations as well as housing associations. So, over to you.
Thank you very much, Debs. Much appreciated. I'm really happy to be here to speak to you about it. Obviously, I would rather hoped that we'd be getting to meet in person. However, needs must. So I'm going to try and make this as interactive and keeping you awake as possible. It can be a bit dry, I think, sometimes when you're seeing a presentation from afar and you're actually in your room on your own. I think it would be fair to say that we're all still learning when it comes to social value and community benefits, and I'd be really, really interested to get your impact or your input on what you've experienced so far, what you think could be done better, and then open it up for some discussion, because we've got a good mixture of people here. Like I said, we've got some people from housing associations and we've got lots of commercial associates as well, and I'd really like to hear input from all of you. But this is likely to be a discussion that goes on for some time, so for future presentations, any of your experiences would certainly be welcome, so we can try and guide people. So I'm going to do a brief introduction. I think probably most of you might have heard of Lintel Trust. We're Scotland's housing association charity. We have been supporting the housing sector and Scottish communities for the last 40 years in a variety of different roles. Our main aim is to empower communities. We want to address inequality and we want to support housing associations to be the best that they can. We've recently had quite a big business change, actually only happened a week ago, so I'm quite impressed that I'm organised enough to be here. We moved from the Link group of companies and we're now part of the LHC group, which includes the Scottish Procurement Alliance, who some of you will probably have come across before. It's a real good move for Lintel Trust, but it's meaning that I'm going to have to do an awful lot of finding out about procurement. Joy. So I'm going to start it off with asking a bit of a question. I think Deb is going to take over and make this one interactive, so that we can find out what you think about how you're getting on so far. So does your organisation currently use the community benefit clause as a way to secure local business? This is really one for the commercial associates. If you're a housing association, just leave this one out, don't worry, I'll be asking you questions as well. Just so we can get an idea of where everybody sort of sits, if you think about it as being something that you can use to your advantage. Or if it's just something that you think, oh no, something else that I need to add into what's already quite a complex process. Let's see what everybody's got to say about it. Do we have any answers yet, Deb?
I see Karen nodding, I believe we do, so I think the poll.
Aha, oh, that's a good mixture. So we've got some people who are already doing it, some people that aren't doing it, and some people that don't know. Well, that's perfect, because I've aimed this sort of presentation at trying to cover as many bases as possible, just so that we get an overview and people who are at different stages can sort of have a look at what the options are. So there's a lot of very complicated sounding words that are being bandied about. It's the same as every sector. We have our own jargon, and social value is very much one of the buzzwords at the moment. Social value has been more adopted as a concept called social value in England because they have their Social Value Act. However, in Scotland, we have various different acts that lead us to be achieving the same things. We just call them by different names. So social value, it's this is one of the simpler formal descriptions of what it is. So it's looking at the wider financial and non-financial value created by an organisation through its day-to-day activities, and it encompasses well-being of individuals, communities. It looks at social capital created, and it looks at the environment as well. Scottish housing regulator requires evidence of value for tenants and taxpayers, which is why it's particularly relevant for people working with housing associations. Obviously, we're quite a regulated sector, and we need to meet the regulations. So community benefits is the term that we're probably more familiar with when we're looking at the procurement side of things. Community benefits have been named And the definition of them is very similar. I think it's slightly more easy to understand. So it's a tangible, positive social outcome which improves the lives of local people and enables communities to thrive. They can be used for boosting employment and skills, supporting local economies, community projects, promoting inclusion, and for improving the environment. So the aims are largely very similar to social values, so there's a great deal of crossover. So don't get tied up too much with the wording of it. We always like to make things slightly different from English legislation. Personally, I prefer the term community benefits, but social value can encompass a much broader, I think it's a much broader understanding, because there's a lot of talk with tools about social value, and it's not just to do with procurement, it's to do with all of your activities. Those of you who are involved in procurement will know that we're told by the Procurement Scotland Act 2014 that it's compulsory to include community benefits in a tender if it's over 4 million. However, it is good practice to deliver below the legal threshold, and certainly I know a lot of housing associations have procurement policies saying that they will be looking for community benefits in fairly much everything that they procure. Many local authorities are the same. Tendering for business is something that I had very little experience of until about 4 years ago. And having done some work with the Procurement Alliance and having seen how complex and detailed the tendering process is, I can completely understand why you have to have specialists that deal in it. It isn't an easy process. And you've got to look at lots of different elements. Community benefits are just one. So I have another question for you. I'd really like to know what you feel is the most important element in tendering. So if you were to sort of pick which one is your top pick for what's most important, so that's something that generally gets a lot of debate, particularly with small organisations who are saying, well, you know, it's hard enough to come in at a decent price. Have I got to add in the cost of adding extra community benefits? Is that going to disadvantage me? Does that mean that my pricing can't be as competitive? So there are a lot of really relevant questions about it. We've got housing associations here, so I'd be interested to see what your priorities are as well. Because sometimes, depending on relationships with housing associations, sometimes they're not always, you know, they don't always tally up. So we'll wait and see what everybody has to say about that as well. This is actually quite a nosy question. I quite want to find this out and see if this is something that that we're going to have an even spread like the last question. I'll wait until Karen presses the button and we can see the results.
Give it another couple of seconds, Kate, and I'll share.
Ah, that's really interesting. See, I actually thought that the winner on that was going to be price, and I'm really, really pleased to see that it's not. Price is obviously really important, but I'm glad to see that there's quite a lot of added value looked in, and relevant experience is the top answer, which that makes perfect sense because you want to know that the job's going to be done properly. Timescales, and see, community benefits and social value are down at 6%. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that answer. Now I'm going to go on and say to you what I think that priorities can be. So if you're a housing association and you're procuring for goods or service, you will possibly be thinking about these things when you're looking at who you're going to procure with. Obviously, as I said before, it's an incredibly regulated sector. The regulations are very strict, they're checked up on. The housing regulator doesn't take prisoners if they feel that something hasn't been done correctly. It can also be very supportive if people need a bit of extra help. But they are very much looking to make sure that housing associations are committed to the Housing Charter, and they have an annual report every year. And obviously this is going to be priority. So any goods and service that are being offered have got to be able to match up with the expectations of the regulatory framework. There's a big responsibility of housing associations to get to their tenants when they're rent setting. They need to make sure that all the money they spend is getting the best possible value. Sustainability is another of the words that you can't get through a day without hearing at the moment, which is actually really encouraging. It's an extra thing that needs to be done, but I think it's a very positive move. So you want to have a look at sustainability, both in terms for the housing associations you'd like to work with, but you also want to have a look at it for your own business. if you have an impact, well, most work that people do, in fact, all work that people do has either a positive or negative impact on the local environment, whether that is increased traffic, whether that is you've planted some beautiful trees outside in your outdoor areas. There's always going to be some sort of impact. And obviously the local economy and the community are very involved in this. They want to live in a nice, sustainable area. They want to know that they're doing their bits. They want to know that they're going to keep a nice local area. The local economy is a really big deal. And this is where, if you are a local organisation, this can really work to your advantage. Bigger isn't always better. And certainly with community-based housing associations, they're really keen to engage with local businesses and keep the spend within their local economy. It's something that's worth thinking about. And I think that that's something we're recognising quite widely now, is that local spend is actually very powerful, and it certainly helps communities. There's very simple, basic things about that. It's not just about keeping spending within the local area. It's also about reducing carbon footprint, also about engaging with local people. Lots and lots of opportunities come from this. And obviously the big one, government legislation. Anybody doing any procurement will be painfully aware of the Procurement Reform Act. It pretty much dictates how you procure. It's got to be done very fairly. There's a process that has to be gone through. And also they have specified that community benefits have got to be included over the threshold. Most housing associations will either already have a procurement policy, or they'll certainly be working towards having a procurement policy. So one thing that I would say is go on their websites, find out if their procurement policy is published, download it and have a read, because it's going to make it an awful lot easier for you to see what their priorities are, and then see if your community benefit offering can match up with that, so you're working together. Now, I'm not going to read through all of these because it's a bit wordy, but how important is the community benefit and social value part of tendering? Now, as we all know, there's an awful lot involved in it. It's a vast subject area, and I'm so glad there are experts that deal with it. The community benefits part is the part that I've had most to do with, but it is a vital part. I think it would be fair to say that austerity had bitten all our communities very hard before COVID even arrived. COVID has really accelerated the inequalities. It's made life a lot harder, not just for local communities, but it's made it a lot harder for businesses. And obviously, we're still to find out what the long-term effects of it are. So when public money is being spent, it would be really hard to justify not including a community benefit at this point, providing it's not putting businesses at risk. So if a housing association is having a look at various different bids, and they have a little look and there's a fair amount of similarity in what's being offered, it can really make a difference if your community benefit offering is something thoughtful, something that's really relevant to their community, and it's something that they need, and it's something that you can provide. Also, it's worth saying that if you are an organisation that always offers some form of community benefit, regardless whether you're over or under the threshold, it really says something about your company. It says that you're committed, that you really want to invest in Scottish communities, and it certainly helps to cement relationships. Not to mention, if you undertake good community benefit activities, you've got to broadcast it. It's a wonderful thing. I think sometimes people do an awful lot of really good social value work, and they either don't recognise it as social value, or they think it's just something that we do. It's something that you should be broadcasting. Anything good that you're doing, broadcast it. It's great for your reputation, but it's also great for your staff. It's great for the community around you. It just makes you, it's a real connector, I think. And people are happy to read good news because there's precious little good news around at the moment. We all like to think we can read a happy headline when we log on in the morning. I completely understand everybody's trying to rebuild after COVID. I don't think there's probably any business that's escaped the impact of lockdown, not being able to operate normally. We've all reacted really quickly. Everybody's adapted really well, which is wonderful. But I don't think that any of us can pretend it's been an easy year. So what I'm hoping is the case for the people who perhaps don't know quite as much about community benefits just now, don't see it as an additional barrier to business. It can be a complete opportunity. And I think particularly because we have seen the amazing things that communities can do and small businesses, and they have been doing for the last year and a half, I think there is definitely a new understanding. People can be very, very ingenious. And I have to say that if you get commercial associate and housing association collaborating together, that can be a real winning combination. You can talk and you can engage and you can cooperate, and it's my favourite word, collaborate. Once you're collaborating, that means you're both going to aim for the same thing, which means there's no confusion and there's not going to be any case of people sort of crossed wires, misunderstandings. And also, one really important thing is to say is that the community benefit, it doesn't need to be something big and expensive. It can be something relatively simple. It can be something that's not going to cost you any actual money, but it might have huge value to the community that you're working with. That's a key one, is it can be a real barrier. I think people think that is going to cost me an absolute fortune, and it really doesn't have to. So I have touched a little bit on the power of Scottish businesses during lockdown, and people were absolutely incredible. People have stepped up. It's amazing. Businesses that previously perhaps have had less to do with communities have actually been really engaged. I mean, we've had donations of food and supplies, PPE, we've had furloughed staff volunteering. That's within housing associations and within commercial associations, associates. So people have been volunteering their time, people have been lending equipment, they've been lending access to their office space or their premises so that it can be used temporarily for sort of distributing care packages, that kind of thing. So we all know that everyone's got it in, and when talking about building things back, everybody says we want to continue that good feeling. We want to continue tapping into communities and getting everybody working together in a locality. So is this something new? Social value. So the community benefits are very procurement focused. Social value doesn't have to have anything to do with procurement. It can be to do with your day-to-day activities. So I'm asking a quick question here. Is it something new that you need to add to your workload? So is this something that you feel you might already be incorporating into your organisation, or is it something completely brand new that you need to bring in, and it could potentially be, extra work? So I'm just interested to find out where people are sitting on this question, because that'll dictate how much I say. So we'll find out what everybody's opinions are. I think a social value, it's sometimes the language that can put people off. We're such a jargon infested sector, and there's little peculiarities in each area as well. So social value is something that's been bandied around in housing associations for quite a long time, and it's to do with evidencing things, and especially people who are community based. It's something that they've been aware of for a long time, and some people have been reporting on it for quite a long time as well. It's newer to some people. Aha, see, 58% of you do know that social value is quite possibly already happening and you don't even know it. So that's really reassuring. I'm glad that there's some people here that are not sure, because it means I'm not completely preaching to the converted. And the people who think it is something you need to add, I hope that I'm going to be able to give you a nice surprise and let you know that you're probably already doing quite a lot of positive social value activities. So there's an awful lot of things that you might already be doing. So I think we've all made a bit of a move towards reducing paper waste. People have been going digital for a while, and that has been really sped up during lockdown. So by reducing the amount of paper that you use, that's a social value impact. So straight away, that's good for the environment. Most places, when they have old tech, can either donate it or it can be upcycled and repurposed. That's been particularly valuable during lockdown, particularly with lots of children that have been lacking the ability to be able to access online schooling. So that's another fantastic thing that you quite possibly are already doing. If you're not already doing it, it's a really easy thing to organise. It's just something that you can do. It's not going to cost you money. There'll be organisations willing to come and collect your old tech. If you are recycling, introducing recycling into the workplace, obviously if you have a lot of waste, this is something that you'll have to address anyhow. But if you are even just reducing food waste in the workplace, you're recycling paper and cardboard, all of that is a contribution if you're managing to cut down on what goes to landfill. If you're having looks at ways to reduce your carbon footprint, do you car share? Are there people that cycle to work? Are there people that walk to work? All of these things add social value. And if, as a business, you are supporting people or encouraging people to look at different ways of travelling, healthier ways, ways that have less impact on the environment, again, that's already a social value. And you don't even need to add that in. Chances are you probably employ people who live locally. Again, that's more social value. Offering work experience placements, maybe you go and visit schools or colleges, all of these things, they're adding value. And I think that we can quite often underestimate our everyday things and think, oh, this is awful, everything that's going to have to change, this is another thing that I've got to add, and how am I going to cope with bringing all this in as well? That's not necessarily the case. A lot of things you've already got in place, you just do them as part of your day-to-day stuff. It's a case of evidencing them, having a look and saying, what do we do already? And all of this can help when you're tendering. If you're an ethical business, people are going to be more willing to work with you. Since addressing community benefits, I've had quite a few opportunities to work in workshops and to speak to lots of people. And the biggest thing 4 years ago was housing associations saying, but we don't know what to ask for. You know, there hasn't really been any guidance. Scottish Government, it says we need to include this, but we don't know what to ask for. And businesses were fairly similar, large businesses. So the Balfour Beatties and the really big organisations, they have something in place. They have community benefit experts working for them. They have incredibly good reporting tools. And if you go to a conference and they're presenting, it's really slick. It's beautiful. And you think, Christ, how's my business going to actually achieve this? How are we going to report to this level? Well, you don't actually need to. There's lots of different levels of doing things. Big is great for some things, but small is great for some things as well. And the key thing, whether you're big or whether you're small, is that you actually connect with your customer. So the sooner you can connect with a housing association, the better. If you've got local knowledge, that's fantastic. If you have a little look about the area that the contract's going to be delivered in, do a little bit of research, find out what the area is all about, find out what the issues are. You might live in the area, in which case you'll have great local knowledge. I would say one thing, and this is from my personal experience dealing with managing a community benefit fund, is quite often the person in an organisation who's responsible for procurement isn't necessarily the best person for you to speak to about what the community needs. So some organisations have got community investment teams, or they've got community engagement officers. They're the people who are more likely to know exactly what the community needs. So when you're having initial discussions, ask your procurement contact and say, is there somebody in particular that I should speak to, or is there somebody that you could speak to, and give out the information to everybody to say what this is, what it is that our community is really looking for just now, what our aims are, what's in our business plan, what do we want to try and achieve. Planning is obviously a big part of it. I would say if you get the opportunity and you are local, engage with local people. If it's a big project and houses are being built, there's going to be feelings about it. There's going to be compulsory sort of get-togethers. There's got to be consultations with the community. And I think the more you can find out about people and the more interested you are in what they want and what they want their community to be, it puts the power in their hands. And I think essentially the secret to good communities is not saying what we think communities need. It's about listening and finding out what they need and finding out whether or not we can match that. The implementation is a big thing. And this is where it's really important that you and your customer have got to make sure that you've agreed how you're going to monitor things. You need to be able to evidence the fact that you've delivered what you say you would. You also want to be able to have a look and say what's worked and what's not worked. This is a big deal because it means that it's going to make a difference to your future decision making as well. So I've got a few pointers for this. I'm not going to go through these one by one because I talk too much as it is. I'm going to make sure that everybody gets access to the slides afterwards. So if you want to have a look at them as a wee guide, we've already discussed about including what you're already doing. Shout about your locality. Housing associations want to spend in the local communities. It's a very positive thing for them. Know your customer. I've already mentioned this. Do as much finding out about them as possible. And if you are planning and you put your plan together and it's going to support your customer to achieve their procurement aims, then you're going to have a big brownie point added to you. You can personalise your offering. So if you live locally, you'll know about your area, you'll know about any issues, you'll know about which bits are, I'll put this really nicely, which bits are lovely areas and which bits need some improvement. So you'll have an idea about which places are perhaps affected by high levels of unemployment. Then you're going to be looking at what the solution might be there. You might have other areas that it's a lot of retired people who are suffering with social isolation. So you'll be looking at delivering something completely different in that area. I've already said about this, about engaging with community-based staff. Now, the key thing here is that you keep your offering proportionate. And I would say that's something else that's really important. Community benefits have got to work for both parties. So you can only offer what's not going to be damaging to your company. You need to make sure that it is relevant and that you can deliver it. So there's no point in promising the earth and then not being able to deliver. Generally, people are fairly flexible. So if you think that delivering a certain thing will happen and then something comes up, or experience dictates that perhaps there's a better way of delivering it, speak to your organisations. It's all about communication. Everybody wants the best outcome for the community. It's not a big scary thing that the whip's going to be cracked. It's more about communicating and making sure that it works for both sides. Agree before you start about how you're going to monitor things and report back. And be honest when you're doing feedback. It's lovely to say everything went to plan, it all went perfectly, but in reality that doesn't always happen. So you've got to learn from experience as well. And if you evaluate honestly, then you can pass your information on, and then next time you tender, you can give an honest evaluation and say, do you know what, we tried this. Next time we think we could do it better by doing this. And then write up a wee case study, share your success. I'm going to say this again, good stuff needs to be shouted about. It really does. If you're doing something really well, people will be happy to celebrate with you. People will be happy to say, look at such and such, didn't they do a cracking job there? And look how engaged they are in the local area. So I talked a lot about the idea of approaching it and the ideas behind it. So I've come up with some suggestions. Again, you can see all these on the slides, but some of these are really good and not expensive. If you are delivering a huge development, you can have a look at things like apprenticeships, and traditionally that is what's happened. It's a really easy fix because you know that you can take on a certain number of apprentices. That's going to help towards employability. That's wonderful if you've got a good, big, long-term project. In reality, a lot of organisations and a lot of contracts are much smaller, and it's not feasible to promise that level of investment. So you can have a look at other different ways of doing it instead. So work placements. I mean, schools, local schools are always looking for it. Again, college visits, school visits, pop in, talk about what you do. There's really, really regular, when things are slightly more normal, career events at schools. Send a representative along to that, get chatting to local people so that they know what they need to do if they want to access your area. Use and subcontract to local business, voluntary groups, social enterprises wherever possible, and broadcast that fact as well. Make sure that the people in your supply chain are also organisations that value sort of social inputs to their environments as well, and that they're sustainable. The environmental ones, these are all really useful things that we can do. I've mentioned a couple of them before. Sustainable products, the same as your supply chain. Make sure that the people that you're working with are working to environmental guidelines. And if you have circumstances around you and you've got facilities at your hands, make improvements to public spaces. Outdoor areas are so important at the moment, and it's all helping towards the Scottish Government targets as well. We also have some other areas here, so social things. You're supporting a local charity or community teams, what have you. Sponsor a local football team, sponsor a local youth choir, sponsor the older people's get-togethers, the coffee mornings, whatever it is, you know. Do something relatively small like that. You don't even need to sponsor them. Let them have access to your meeting room. Involve local residents in things that you're looking towards progressing. You want to make any events that you put on accessible. You can support anything to do with your local heritage or culture. So it might even be a litter pick. It might be volunteering some time from your workers, or allowing them some time to go and volunteer for something that they feel quite passionate about as well. Staff health initiatives are good as well. So you could always get staff up, you know, doing walking groups at lunchtime, that kind of thing. This is working on the assumption we ever go back to normal, but I'm presuming that we will. Community projects, again, are really, really easy. Donating unused materials are good. Obviously, they have to be safe. We've got a great example of one of the smaller housing cooperatives in Glasgow. Was donated a whole load of wooden pallets, and they actually had a family fun day, and representatives turned up and encouraged the children to build structures out of pallets, and they had real hammers and real nails, and they had a fantastic time. Now, all it cost that organisation was transport to get the pallets down there, provision of a few tools, and, you know, a bit of staff time. It really wasn't an awfully big investment, but it made a huge difference, and the feeling locally towards that organisation was vastly improved. Partner with a housing association, have a celebration of the fact that their community gardens got some new equipment, etc. Or share some skills. If you are a legal firm, Kirsty, then could you do a pop-up advice service for a day? Share some skills. If you are a financial organisation, could you perhaps do a workshop on basic day-to-day finances? There's even a webinar, some sort of short thing like this would be great. There's a few ideas for you to go with, and then you get to reap the benefits. So obviously then there are lots and lots of benefits that come to you. There's a really big shift towards supporting local responsible businesses. We all know that housing associations are publicly funding. Look at the broader community aims. It's not just all about cheapest bids. It's great for you to cement your relationships within business. It encourages repeat business. Housing sector is quite small. Everybody speaks to each other. If there's someone that's reliable and committed and wants to collaborate, then they're going to be the preferred supplier of choice. If you understand the impact of your business, then you can tailor the offers that you put into procurement opportunities. And investors do value businesses that give something back. It's incredible, the shift of people. I mean, CSR has been around for a long time, but it seems to be that it's all been heightened recently. Everybody's more aware. And this one, you really should celebrate the good stuff. I sound like a broken record, but honestly, everything that you do that's good, celebrate it, get it out there, let people know, and that encourages more good stuff. And then you can add it to your next tender so that you can evidence the fact that you're actually really good at what you do and you do follow through on your promises. I'm going to briefly touch on how to evidence your social value. Michael is going to say a few words about this, but I would say it has to be consistent, it has to be accurate, no matter what it is that you decide to do in terms of reporting. It has to be something that's comparable. You need to use a mixture of reporting methods. The jargony words are qualitative and quantitative. What that essentially means is you're looking at numbers, so the number of people that have benefited from the thing that you've done. And then you've got your qualitative, which is telling the story about it. So we need to know. So it can be as simple as saying, well, we put on a financial inclusion workshop and 25 people turned up. We said that we'd do this, and we said that we thought that it would be great for 35 people. Only 20 people turned up. So next time we know perhaps we need to do it slightly differently, or maybe there's something we could do to make it more inviting. Add the narrative. So you want to get a case study, ideally. It can be anonymous. It doesn't need to be massively detailed. Just say, you know, somebody turned up to this financial inclusion workshop. Not only did they learn how to get online and do online banking, but it also led them to look a little bit further into it, and then they're actually now tackling their debt. So you want to capture the unexpected findings as well as the actual expected findings as well. Some customers, like some of the larger housing associations in particular, who are quite far down the social value reporting system, they might have a monitoring system in place. Ask them to share it with you. And there are reporting methods where you can put a financial value onto the social value reporting tools. And that is more Michael's area, I think he's going to discuss with you. I have made a note of a few of the reporting options just now. So we have Social Value Portal, which is very widely used in England. They've adopted the TOMS measurement method, which is actually very, very similar to what we report on. And they have different pricing levels for what you want to access, but there is free availability if you want to have a look at what the social value of a certain activity is. Scottish Government hasn't said how they want to see it recorded. They just say it has to be measured and recorded. So that does give a little bit of leeway. And SFHA have been moving forward with social value, and they have also got a social value toolkit for housing associations. And that, I'm going to swiftly move on to Michael and let him explain a wee bit more about that.
Thank you very much, Kate. So just thanks for letting me come along and speak to you today. When I realised Kate was doing this, I thought it might be useful to give a bit of context just around the work that SFHA are doing with their members, and that, you know, that might help kind of inform contractors and suppliers the ways in which they'll interact with social value. So my name is Michael McLaughlin. I'm the social insight lead for HACT. Based at SFHA. We're working on a social insight project, basically with the aim to increase the impact or increase the measurement and demonstration of impact of social housing. So as part of our Innovation and Future Thinking programme, we've got a work stream called Reducing Poverty and Demonstrating Impact, which was based on a survey we did members back in 2018 that reported that only 37% of our members measured impact, and then, you know, consequently even fewer then reported on it. And it's a bit like what Kate was saying about, you know, about when you do good, you need to celebrate that. And I think for us, that's kind of massively important, particularly with the affordable housing programme. So the last affordable housing programme aimed for 53,000 houses, and we were keen for, you know, it was 35,000 of those to be social housing. And you know, the affordable housing programme seemed to be going well up to the pandemic. But one of the findings from Audit Scotland in the last programme was that as a sector we weren't measuring the impact of our work enough, and I think really pretty much what Kate says about that. So from my experience, a lot of the work that HACT do is with housing associations. HACT stands for Housing Association Charitable Trust. However, more and more, due to community benefit stuff for the Procurement Reform Act, we're working more and more with suppliers and contractors. And actually, so housing associations, we always look at that, you know, we provide more than bricks and mortar, and effectively everything we do creates social impact, you know, and I think that's the same with suppliers. So everything you do, your built environment, if you're building a house or you're working on a development or working on a park or any of these things that will create kind of wider good, is creating social value, and it's about understanding how we collect that. So I think, you know, for us it's kind of you know, we're looking at housing associations in the past and thinking about that. We really need to support them and, you know, to demonstrate that impact. So one of the things that came out of the work we've been doing is SFHA commissioned a report from CASH, which is UK Collaborative Centre of Housing Evidence, on the social impact of social housing. And basically what it said was that investment in social housing generates economic and social benefits for Scotland and its people, including reducing poverty, homelessness, improving health and creating jobs. So really it has, some really kind of, sorry, I'm hearing children fighting in the hall. So it provides real tangible outcomes, and I think we think of social value being the kind of soft and fluffy cake decorating and nice to do thing, but actually some of these things, there's kind of real kind of strong fact behind a lot of that. And I think given that one of the other finds in that report was not only that housing associations measure social and economic value of their work, but they evidence it in a way that aligns with the Scottish Government National Performance Framework. And I think Kate touched on that earlier on, that the Scottish Government are very keen on the wellbeing approach, which is what the way HACT measure social value is wellbeing valuation. So what that means is it's, so for example, a job, somebody going into employment creates £14,000 worth of social value. That doesn't mean they get £14,000 in their hand, or it doesn't mean it creates £14,000. What it means is it would take handing that person £14,000 to feel the benefit that getting that job allowed them to feel. So, I think the fact that Scottish Government are thinking about that and housing associations are then trying to fit into that, I think it kind of follows that the supply chain, and there's going to be requirements with that. And I think, with the Procurement Reform Act, I think that really kind of started the ball in motion for that. But I think there's kind of some more kind of operational reasons that housing associations want to report on their social impact, and some of that is just the fact that some people know it's just right to do it. Creating that kind of non-economic benefits to society, and it produces better value of project and creates kind of more sustainable working environments. So, and I think some people just are aware of that and have that kind of as a driver internally. Some of the other stuff around housing association new build developments, when they're lending, banks are now asking for ESG ratings, which is environmental social governance, and I think that the S in that is pretty much covered off by the work that we've been doing with housing associations, and I think that they'll then be looking for all projects to be measured in some way, and I think the community benefits programme is as Kate said, kind of easy way to demonstrate that. Not always easy to do it, but it's a straightforward way to demonstrate it. And also it's good PR. It's good PR for organisations, for housing associations, it's good PR for suppliers, and it is. If SFHA often pick up on that, the news stories around some of these larger projects and the benefits they've got. And I think the reason I draw on the Scottish Government thing is, I think when Scottish Government start using the same terminology and start talking about well-being, I think that it shows that that's the kind of direction of travel. And I think it's kind of worth any of you who are particularly interested in it. Nicola Sturgeon does a TED talk on well-being, basically explaining how non-economic how success can be measured in non-economic terms for organisations and countries. So it's really, really interesting. So it's worth doing that. So effectively, what our members asked us to do, so they decided upon the wellbeing approach based on some of the stuff I've said there, and wanted to social value any work or resources we provided for them. They wanted us to go along the HACT wellbeing approach, and HACT created a thing called the Social Value Bank, which effectively is it allows you to calculate social value on, I think there's 10 indicators on it, and it's something that contractors can sign up to, and I'll certainly put kind of links to any things I mentioned, like the Social Value Bank, the CASH report, and the Nicola Sturgeon TED talk. I'll put that in the chat at the end if you want to catch up on that. So basically the toolkit, what we did was we wanted to provide practical methods or practical resources that would allow, I suppose what I was thinking was smaller housing associations who don't have the resources to have procurement departments, to have, and they outsource a lot of that stuff. I think organisations deserve the right to be able to measure some of this stuff as well, and they want to be able to report on their social impact and want to be able to have ESG rating that will allow them to build more housing and will allow Scottish Government to increase the amount of social housing and affordable housing programmes. So and what effectively what we did was we created a tailored version of the social value calculator that was very specific around what the main areas of impact was for housing associations, around things like tenancy support, around homelessness, and around environmental. So some of that's things you guys will deal with, particularly around repairs. So, providing certain repairs to buildings, like ensuring that it's wind and watertight, that creates social value because it enables someone to feel more belonging to the home, to the house, makes them feel better, and actually has it reduces some of the inequalities in health so what we provided was that some other kind of more kind of specific tools around local context. So community engagement plans, as Kate mentioned, actually it's good to know the area, good to speak to people, and provided just very straightforward, almost kind of tables that if you just follow that step, and then how to move on. We gave some I was going to say we, but Kate actually input into this, so gave some kind of provisions on what you can do around community benefit programmes, some ideas and ways to approach that.
Michael, I'm going to have to cut in there because I'm just really aware of the time.
Sorry. So
I've talked too long, and I just want there to be an opportunity for some questions.
Absolutely. In effect, what we've done is we've created a whole load of resources for them, and if you guys want to understand that more, then it allows you to be able to respond to what they want. So we think some of the responsibility is the housing associations, so they should know what to ask for. So hopefully they'll sign up to have a more social value policy, include social value clauses in contracts, and then it's not your responsibility always to say this is what we can provide. They should know what they want to ask for, so we're going to support them doing that. So I will drop all this in the chat, but if you want to know more, please do get in touch. Aye.